Mars Incorporated, the food giant known for iconic brands like M&Ms and Snickers, is a longtime heavyweight. But as customers and their diets change, CEO Grant Reid is making sure the company does too. Reid has led Mars since 2014, soon after the family-owned seller of candy, pet food, and more celebrated 100 years in business. He's here to talk about how he rose from a small village in Scotland to an American boardroom, how the company has adapted to health and climate-aware customers, and why it made a 2-ton Snickers bar.
Influencers with Andy Serwer is brought to you by Verizon.
Welcome to Influencers. I'm Andy Serwer, and please welcome our guest, Grant Reid, who is the CEO of Mars Incorporated. Grant, nice to see you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
So for those people who don't know Mars, it's a very large private company, 115,000 employees, $35 billion in revenue, makes a variety of foods, pet foods, candy, of course.
Yes.
Give us the lay of the land, Grant.
Yeah, so I think you captured quite a bit of it there. We're a family-owned business, been in business for over 100 years, based on our 5 principles. We're about almost $40 billion business these days.
Sold you a little short, sorry about that.
That's okay. It's about 125,000 associates. We've been growing quite a bit.
Right.
It has main segments. Most people know it from its confectionery business, so M&Ms, Snickers, Starburst. We actually acquired Wrigley as well, so Orbit, Altoids, etc. But our pet food business, which includes brands like Pedigree, Sheba, Royal Canin, is also a very big part of it. And then we have a food business with Uncle Ben's Rice, Dolmio sauces, and we have some new areas. We have a partnership with Kind, and we have a new area called Edge, which is about personalised nutrition. So we cover quite a big spectrum, but based on 5 principles, family-owned, and still maintained by the family today.
Yeah, the Mars family, one of the biggest private companies
Yes.
in the world. And can you talk about that? I mean, it's kind of unusual. There's you guys in Cargill, a number of other very large private companies. What's the difference, and why has the company stayed private for so long?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've been in Mars 30 years. I worked my way up, and the first thing I would say, I work for real people. So I work for the family, and that, for me, that makes a big difference, and for many of our associates, that personal connection. I think the second bit is a family who cares. We've been talking about mutuality and giving something back to our consumers, our associates, stakeholders in the planet. Since 1947, there was an original letter on the objective of the company. So it's that long-term view, the family connection. We don't have to think or report quarterly, so it gives us an opportunity to think. We like to think generationally, so we can take a longer-term view. So I think there's a number of advantages. And final thing is the family puts 90% of the cash back into the business to allow us to grow. So, I'd see a number of really great advantages.
And you're able to attract top talent without having publicly traded stock?
Yes, in fact, I think we attract a lot of talent because of our purpose. It starts with, the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. And we're very unusual. We've been talking about economics and mutuality and 5 principles, and that's a big draw for talent of today. In fact, I get measured by what we call the Mars Compass, and it's really got 4 components with the purpose at the center. But it starts with total shareholder return. If you're not generating great returns, then you're not a high-performance business. And people want to work for successful companies. But it also includes the quality of that growth. So what channels are we in, what markets are we in, what categories are we in, and then societal impact, what are we doing for the environment and for people on the planet, and then trusted reputation. So it's a more holistic metrics set than probably the old Milton Friedman, shareholder value at any cost.
Right, you hear about companies trying to move away from that model. But Mars used to be known as an insular, even secretive organization maybe decades ago. So how has the company changed from that sort of inward-looking focus to a more outward focus?
Yeah, so it was a very different world, and I think it's more of perhaps a family trait as well, which is they're relatively low-key, and they let their brands do the talking. So M&Ms, Snickers, Pedigree, Sheba, they were out there very much connecting with the consumer, but the family and the company was very private. And that, I think, was a competitive advantage at the time. Nobody knew what we were doing, when we were doing it, and we could really invest in our brands and grow. And I think the world's changed quite a bit with social media, with that new consumer, the millennial consumers looking for transparency.
Right.
Where are these brands coming from? What's the company behind it? What do they do? What are they doing for the rest of the environment? And so we came out to find our voice in this new age.
And so, Grant, you're from Scotland, right?
Scotland originally.
So how did you make this journey from Scotland to becoming the CEO of this iconic company?
Yeah, so I started, as you rightly say, in a small mining village in Scotland, and I've been with Mars 30 years. And if you told me you're going to become the CEO of one of the best companies in the world, I would have laughed back then. But I think that's what Mars and the family business does. Took me on in marketing. I went through sales.
What year was that then?
That was 1988 was the first year I joined, so
Right.
long time ago. But they've always given me new challenges, new opportunities. It's not about the school that you went to, or it's really about meritocracy, and they've given me some great opportunities. I've enjoyed it the whole time, and they've given me, I think, different career steps that probably no other company would. Starting in marketing, sales, commercial procurements. I spent a lot of time out in Ivory Coast and other places, through general management and running our chocolate business and CEO about 5 years ago. So, it's been a great journey for me. I've enjoyed most of it, so it's been fun.
All right, so you know about the chocolate business. We're going to
Yes.
get into that in a minute, but talk to us sort of about the whole portfolio of brands and where the real opportunities are for you guys going forward.
Yeah, so as I said, I think we've got opportunities across all of our segments and brands, but we've been going through quite a bit of transformation, and I can touch on that. But our confectionery business is still growing very well. We have a pet business, which I'll probably elaborate on. So most people think of our pet food business, which is where we started. And we've had that business since the 1930s. So we've had it a long time. So pet food, we're the #1 pet food company in the world, with the Pedigree, Sheba, and some of the other brands, but Royal Canin, which is a big veterinary brand. And we've expanded over the last 4 or 5 years into vet health. We were in vet health to some extent with our Banfield company, which was partly owned by PetSmart. We bought out PetSmart to become 100% Banfield, and since then we've been expanding into the vet health business. So we're now the biggest vet health company in the world. We bought Pet Partners, we bought Blue Pearl, we bought BCA in the US, which are the foremost veterinary health practices in the US. Brilliant people there, great veterinaries and vet techs, creating a better world for pets, taking care of pets, which is a fantastic reason to get up in the morning. I have 2 dogs myself, Maddie and Ollie, and taking
Got to
care.
give them a shout out with the names.
Shout
I
out,
like
exactly.
that. That's nice.
I mentioned my dogs, I haven't mentioned my kids.
I know.
but we'll-
Nice.
and then, since then we've added Linnaeus and Anakura, and we've expanded our footprint internationally.
Right.
And at the same time, I mentioned, Kind, which is a great Better For You brand based
Yeah.
out of New York here.
Yes.
And we're partnering with Daniel Lubetsky, who's a fantastic.
He sat right in that chair a
Oh,
number
really?
of months ago.
Okay.
Yep.
He's a great guy. Founded the business. We're partnering with him, and we've taken Kind in 18 months to 30 countries around the world.
So you have a distribution deal with him essentially?
Yes, we have a partnership with
Partnership,
him, yeah.
right.
So we
Got
have
it.
the rights to the international side. So yeah, that's working well. And then finally, last but not least, is what we call Edge, which is new areas. So Cocovia, which is based on supplement based on cocoa for your circulation. But we just bought a company out of Berlin called Foodspring, which is a personalized nutrition company doing protein powders, protein drinks, and that type of thing. So it's direct to consumer. So, the name of the game is transformation, going where your consumer is going, making sure you're not static. And I think that's not just for us, but it's for, you've had many CPG companies sitting in the seat, and you've got to transform with everything else that's going on in society. If you're not changing, you're dying. So that's
Right.
why we're doing it.
Now, having said that about transformation, I want to drill down into one of your most high-profile brands and one of my favorites, which is
Yes.
the Snickers bar.
Yes.
And can you just tell me everything about Snickers? I mean, I'm just fascinated. Isn't it the #1 candy bar in the world?
Yes, I think M&Ms might be bigger than it, but it's certainly one or
Sister
two
brand
in
right
the
there.
world.
Okay,
So
one or
it's
two.
one of our other brands, but
Right.
it's a great brand, as you know.
How many do you make? Where do you make them?
We make 5 million a day in one factory. So
5 million a day in
yeah.
one factory?
So we make so many, I don't even know what the number is, but it's a big brand, very popular. As you've seen, it was in the Super Bowl recently with the 2-ton bar.
Yes.
So that's the biggest Snicker I think we've ever made, maybe perhaps anybody's ever made. It's a great brand. It's, you know, it goes against both men and women, and it's about hunger satisfaction, and you're not you when you're hungry. So it's a great brand, and it's one of the portfolio.
And where do you make it? Do you make it all globally or just in the U.S.?
So our philosophy, and again, it comes from that family connection. We like to be vested in the communities in which we operate and sell. So unusually for most multinationals, we actually manufacture mostly in the countries in which we operate. So we've got big facilities in the US, but we have facilities all over the world making Snickers as well as the rest of our brands.
It's also hard to send chocolate around the world. I know that.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm fascinated, just staying with Snickers a little bit, with the labeling, the way that it just has words like shout or run in the same font that Snickers is. Now, how did that come about?
Yeah, so, you know, Snickers in particular has got a very distinctive memory structure, you know, so the parallelogram, the coloring, so people know it's Snickers even when it doesn't say Snickers.
Yes.
So just to add some fun, you know, our consumers are younger, they want fun, they're looking for something interesting, so we change the name on there and it gives them a chance to interact with the brand. And I think now with social media, as you well know, creating that direct linkage and conversation with the consumer and doing things like that gives us an opportunity to do that.
And will there come a day when I can just go to Mars.com and order a box of Snickers with my own name on them?
I think that's possible. We just did a limited edition pecan Snickers, which sold out in a couple of hours, and that was direct to consumer. So again, you can use social media, you can use some of the new technology to change the relationship with the consumer, and that personalized route, I think, is certainly very possible.
You can take my idea.
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
for it. And then when you mention this pecan thing, I mean, you're always introducing so many new SKUs, stock keeping units, different sizes and shapes and flavors of course, not only Snickers, but of all the foods that you make. How do you decide when to make that kind of a decision?
Yeah, so for Mars, we have our 5 principles, and one of them is the consumer is our boss. So we listen to the consumer. So the consumer loves, you know, M&Ms, Snickers, Pedigree, Dolmio, etc. But they also look for some variety. Now, you know, peanut is still the single biggest flavor for M&Ms, and standard Snickers is still the biggest flavor. But, you know, consumers look for variety, and we try and build that. And also with, you know, with the people much more health conscious, we're looking for different sizes, sugar intake, making sure we're labeling so consumers know what they're eating. They've got different portions under 250 calories. It gives them an opportunity to fit our brands in with their lifestyle. It's part of our sustainable in a generation plan, which is about the planet. It's about the people on the planet, but also about what the people on the planet eat. And so, you know, we really work hard at making sure we meet the needs of all the areas.
Can you tell us what your favorite candy bar is?
It depends.
Come on, you got to give us one.
I will
Okay.
commit. My favorite typically is Galaxy chocolate out of the UK, because that's what I grew up on.
Does that have that crisp in it?
It has, no, it has, it's more of a creamy taste of what you call a European taste, but I love all my brands. For all the brand managers out there who are watching, I love you all.
I knew you were going to go there a little bit. That's okay. Which kid do you like the most is kind of a tough question.
Exactly.
Let me ask you about retailing, Grant, because you guys, I mean, it's kind of surprising that you guys went into retailing, staying in retailing, the M&M stores, I guess they are, and now it sounds like you're even expanding in this, you know, retail apocalypse.
Yeah.
How's that working out for you?
Yeah, so as you know, I mean, part of our raison d'etre, our reason for being, is transformation and change. And one of the big change areas is retail, you know, with the growth of direct-to-consumer. So it gives us an opportunity. So we still are very heavily vested in our retail distribution channel and working with our great partners that we've worked with for many years. But we're also expanding into the new channels and also our own retail outlets. So I was just in Shanghai recently. We just opened a store there. We've got one right here in New York, not far from here in Times Square. But that gives you an opportunity to have an immersive experience with your consumer. So you can walk in there, you've got M&M's characters, you've got apparel, you've got a deeper experience. It's not just about selling a product on a shelf, it's how do you connect with your consumer and are you relevant in today's society. So that's really the reason behind it.
And those businesses are doing okay, the retailing?
Fantastic.
Really, DTC, it's interesting you talk about direct to consumer is a huge trend.
Yes.
You mentioned Shanghai, so I have to ask you about the macro environment for your business.
Yes.
And obviously, not only do we have the trade war that sort of may be sort of coming to a close, but now, of course, the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And how do things look for your operations right now?
Yeah, so so first thing is we have a big business in China. We have about 10,000 associates there. So job one is really taking care of our associates. It's been a very difficult time for them.
You manufacture there?
Yes, we do.
So, okay.
Yeah, we have a big
And
manufacturing
obviously you distribute candy there. And
yes, we do candy, pet foods, both Royal Canin to the vet companies. We have our pedigree pet foods, etc., to the mass channels, and also our confectionery and gum businesses as well, and food products. So,
Right.
so we have quite a range across there. And job one is making sure that not only our associates are safe, but in any way that we can communicate with our consumers. So we've actually been asked by the Chinese government to make some ads to show people how to, using our brands, how to take care of themselves and keep the hygiene up during this time. So that's very flattering and something that we feel we can put back into the environment in China in which we operate. But also taking care of our associates, making sure that they've got masks and other things that they need. So we've been shipping those from around the world in. Once the associates are taken care of, now we've started running our businesses back up. Most of our factories are back up and running. So nobody really knows the ongoing impact. I think it depends how far this goes. But job one is taking care of our employers and associates and our consumers, and then we'll worry about the business after that's fixed.
So it sounds like that maybe the worst of it, from your perspective, is over, because it sounds like you're reopening factories. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're working very closely with the Chinese government and taking their advice.
Right.
So we're slowly ramping back up, but only the safety of our associates
Right.
is paramount. So we're working closely, as I say, with the government, and we're taking their advice.
And just what about the macro environment, leaving aside the coronavirus? Yes. I mean, it's a slow growth world. What opportunities do you see? Where are you getting hurt? Where are some places that you love?
Yeah, so we're actually doing really well. We have a very good global footprint, which was really started by John and Forrest, what we call a Generation 3. We've got a very good balanced global footprint, which helps. And two, part of our transformation journey is to make sure that we're going into what we call, remember I mentioned the Mars Compass, part of that compass is the quality of growth. Are you in the right categories? Are you in the right channels? Are you in the right countries, et cetera, et cetera? So we've been working hard to transform our business, hence the moves into our vet health area. So as I said, we're now the biggest vet health company in the world, a big services company, which is very different for a manufacturer, but also making sure that we're into new areas like personalized nutrition with our FoodSpring and Edge. So last year was a really great year for us. We got off this year to a good start, and we'll see what happens with the coronavirus and other things.
So how much do you disclose, Grant? I mean, when you say you had a good year in 2019, can you talk about revenue growth, at least the top line?
No.
No.
I like it. One of the advantages of being a private company, we don't disclose that information, but we're growing well. We're growing well across all of our segments, and I think that's partly because of the great vision and input from our family, but also the great associates as well.
Well, that must be fun and frustrating at the same time,
It
being
can
a
be.
CEO saying no, right? I mean, what are the challenges of running the business right now?
Yeah, so I think it's like everything else, the world is changing dramatically. It's everything from the use of digital and artificial intelligence all the way through to, as you and I have just discussed, retail distribution. So if you look at artificial intelligence, it's a great example. So to use that one, we've used artificial intelligence for really good output productivity in the factories, allowing us to actually tell you when a machine's going to break down before it breaks down, all the way through to a renal product for cats that tells you well in advance that they may have some renal issues well before a vet can normally find it. But what's really important isn't the use of the technology, it's making sure you don't leave your current associates, what we call associates, employees, behind. And we've spent a lot of time and energy with our internal Mars University, retraining, upskilling. We've taken about 10,000 of our supply people through retraining as their roles increase over time. And we've done the same with design thinking and user centricity. So investing back in our associates while taking advantage of the new technology.
Yeah, and spending on pets exceeds GDP growth, right? I mean, it's a
big
great
area.
category.
It's a big area.
I want to ask you about claims that there's deforestation going on in terms of cocoa farming and
Yes.
your company's ties to that. Is that something you're tied to, and are you concerned about that?
Yes, very concerned. I mean, we've invested $1 billion in sustainable in a generation, and a big part of that is the planet. And so, to maybe give you a specific example, like most companies, when we looked at our sustainable in a generation, we looked at our own factories and our own operations, and we started fixing that first. So, for example, we have about 50% of our global electricity comes from renewable electricity sources, which from wind farms. Similarly, we've cut our greenhouse gas emissions by almost a third. So as our growth increases, now we're finding our greenhouse gas emissions is detached from that. So we've made a big difference in our own operations. However, when you step back and look at the overall footprint, you find that over 80% of your impact on the planet comes from your downstream supply chain.
Right.
So as you rightly say, from cocoa, from corn and other things that we buy in an agricultural base. So we're really focused on it, and we've invested a lot in the space. I was John and Forrest's commercial manager back in 2000, and we were already I was walking farms in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, trying to work with the small shareholder farms, because we are concerned about that.
Yeah, how do you actually bring pressure to bear, though?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the big change I've seen, and I think this decade is going to be really critical, is you've seen there's a recent report out from the UN Compact around where CEOs see the future. And I think the big difference is I think most CEOs now, and there's 1,000 interviewed in this publication, say that yes, it's really important. The big difference I'm seeing is action. So you're seeing more CNOs stepping up and actually leaning in and taking action. So let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a member of the Consumer Goods Forum, and I lead the deforestation pillar with Carrefour. And similarly, there's other pillars looking at plastic, but specifically on deforestation. We now have a coalition together of companies who really want to make a difference, who've said, this is what we want to achieve, here's how we're going to achieve it. So if I give you perhaps a specific example for Mars in that area, we used to buy palm oil pretty much like everybody else. It was 1,500 suppliers, mostly based on price and quality. Well, that's changing dramatically. We're actually in the process of cutting down the number of suppliers from about 1,500 down to more like 100, so that we can see where the palm oil is coming from. We know which farms it's coming from GPS tracking, whether it's coming from any level of deforestation, which is unacceptable to us. So I think the big difference is CEOs, which are 75% of the world's GDP, so it's a big impetus you can have, but it's a coalition. It can't be done by me, it can't be done by any one company.
Right.
It's done by companies, it's done by NGOs, it's done by government, working together to create a movement of change.
So you're able to vet companies that way. And I bet that resonates with your younger constituents, be they employees or customers. And I want to ask you about young people, and let's say Millennials and Gen Z. Do they still eat candy, for instance? Do they care, or aren't they getting all health conscious and not doing it?
It's a good question. So I have two Millennials myself, so Cameron and Charlotte. And
okay, that's a shout out to you guys. Fine.
So I as I said before, I either know a lot about Millennials or I know nothing about Millennials, and probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. So the consumer's definitely changing, and I think when I think back to when I was their age, growing up in Scotland, I wasn't thinking about the planet. I was just thinking, wow, this Snickers bar or Mars bar is fantastic, and I wasn't thinking which company produced it, what are they doing for the planet.
What's it doing for my body too, though?
Yeah, true. And
Right.
so I think there's much more balance. So I think we've been on the front end of that, talking to our consumers. Well, we were the first company over a decade ago to stop marketing to kids. Right? For that reason, we were one of the first to put GDA labeling right on the front of the product to tell the consumers, what the calorific content was and the makeup of the product. So we're responding. The consumer is our boss. So we're definitely responding to the consumer, and the consumer's changing. There's a much broader view, as I've said, of environment and sustainability,
Right.
but also holistic health and wellness. And that's why we've made some of the moves into our partnership with Kind to give a broader opportunity
Right.
for consumers to eat our products in a different environment at a different time, and also to move into things like FoodSpring, which is personalized nutrition focused in on the protein content and the actual diet of each individual person. So there is a big change, but we're moving with the consumer. And when I came into this role, part of the mandate was transformation and change, and we've got to keep that up. And not just me, but other companies as well.
It seems like you guys have made a choice, though, not to do diet candy bars, right? I mean, I don't see that, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't work, it doesn't resonate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so we have tried over the years to have sugar-free,
Yeah.
but you know what, confectionery is a treat.
Right.
We don't want people eating it, you know, as every meal. We want them to see it as a treat, and when people have a treat, and I do the same myself, when I go back, you know, had a tough day, have a cup of coffee and a piece of Galaxy. I want it to taste brilliantly.
Yeah.
And so we've experimented. There is a small market there, but most people, consumers will tell you, when we eat it, we want it to be fantastic.
I think that's a really interesting distinction, and obviously the soda companies have gone the other direction, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't work, but I think it's an interesting distinction that you guys have made, and I certainly understand what you're saying. I want to ask you, this show's called Influencers, Grant,
Yes.
and I want to ask you what you think your influence is and maybe should be or can be going forward on this world.
Yeah, that's great. So first of all, I think it starts, you know, as a CEO, is having a vibrant, exciting, growing company that's creating economic growth, not only for ourselves, but for the communities in which we operate. So that's job one. But I think if I had one dream, it would be to take what we call the economics of mutuality, which is the compass, and really make it a vibrant beacon for other companies to follow. This idea of inclusive capitalism being broader than just financial return. And if we can bring that to life in my tenure, that would be fantastic.
And just a quick follow-up, do you work with other companies that have those sort of same goals, like Unilever and others that have put that forth?
Yeah, so I know Paul Pullman and
Right.
Alan Jope's a fellow Scotsman, but as part of the Consumer Goods Forum, we're working with retailers. That's probably the biggest distinction from the Consumer Goods Forum. It's a mixture of retailers and manufacturers. We also have a livelihood fund with Danone, where we're investing in smallholder farms in places like Madagascar to make sure they have sustainable farming and they can increase their living. It's all about us making 1 million people better off by working for Mars, with Mars.
Grant Reid, CEO of Mars, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
I'm Andy Serwer. You've been watching Influencers. We'll see you next time.